connectivity through the numbers. First up, according to the World Bank, as at 2017, 64% of the Kenyan population had access to electricity. The government wants to get that figure to 100% access by 2022. Now, according to the 2018 National ICT Survey by the Communications Authority of Kenya, 79.5% of the population reported having access to a radio terminal, while penetration of mobile phones was second with 59.8%. Television was placed at third with 2 out of every 5 Kenyans with access to TV. Now, the penetration of devices like computers and services like internet and pay TV was marginal at 9.1%, 7.2%, and 4.3% respectively. Now, when you make the comparison between urban and rural areas, this is where the digital divide becomes even more pronounced. According to the survey, 66.1% of the urban population reported access to TV, while 21.1% of urban population had computers. In the rural areas, those figures were at 29.2% with access to television and 4.3% with computers. Now, with the need for online learning becoming more evident, how are the schools faring on? Well, bear in mind, there are 15 million primary and secondary school learners in Kenya. Currently, 93.4% of public primary schools are covered by what is called the Digital Learning Program. And we'll be getting more on what that program does. And with that, let me introduce my panelists really quickly. We have Dr. Bitange Ndemo, who is the entrepreneurship professor at the University of Nairobi, as well as Jacqueline Onyango, the deputy senior director at KICD, and last but not least, Jonathan Wesaya, an education expert. Thank you all for joining me and your patience as well. Let me begin with you, Jacqueline, because of course we know KICD has been at the forefront when it comes to creating a curriculum that is digital friendly, online friendly, and has had to work really quickly to ensure that the learners who have been at home for now well over a month are being engaged in some way. What has the response been to at least the curriculum and the content that's been broadcast on television, radio, and YouTube as well? What response have you been getting from learners and their parents as well?
Thank you, Victoria, for having me on the program. I think so far the response has been very good in terms of the access that children have been having listening to these programs, and the fact that they are able actually to appreciate that the programs are resonating well with what they're supposed to be learning in school. The TV programs have given them the opportunity to actually watch a teacher take them through a lesson while it is virtual, and that is easy for a child to assimilate with. Beyond that, they are able to listen to the radio programs that are being broadcast on through KBC. And that, again, in terms of their being able to just follow up on what they've been doing in school has been very good for them. And the engagement, I think, has been good with the support they're receiving from the parents.
And how effective are these lessons in the curriculum? Some fear it may not be as serious or as involving as the face-to-face teaching that they're used to in school because they don't have anyone really monitoring them apart from maybe their parents if they happen to be at home. How effective is it?
I think we need to look at it from the position that, yes, the child will not definitely have the regular teacher in class with them, but the fact that they are being taken through what they learn and they can listen to somebody else is still as effective as the teacher they have. One of the things that we encourage even in the school system is that you can have what we refer to as resource persons. A resource person is somebody who would come and speak to the learners over the same subject that the teacher would be talking about, but this person may not necessarily be a teacher. It could even just be a professional. But in the case that now we are broadcasting to them, you realize that the person actually taking them through the lesson is a professional teacher, not the teacher they are used to. but another teacher whom they can listen to and therefore get a different perspective but the same content that they are supposed to be going through.
Dr. Ndemo, let me bring you in. You wrote a column in a local daily this week saying this is a time that digital classrooms need to come to fruition. And many have said that the infrastructure is just lacking. It's not practical because when you look at even the penetration of something like mobile phones or television, it's not as prevalent as we would have wanted it, at least for a digital learning program to be widespread in the country. But why do you believe that this is the time, and how practical is it in terms of making it a reality?
Victoria, thank you for getting me into this program. I always say that it is a crisis that magnifies inequality or injustice. And that is what has exactly happened. And we should take this as an opportunity out of this crisis to establish where the inequalities are, and then we begin to respond. And as I speak to you, last week, the Minister for Communication said very clearly that they are going to leverage on Google and telecom services, which would provide broadband across the country. It is the time now to ask the minister, through policy, to make certain adjustments. Access will be sorted out. We can practically teach every student in this country using online services. Even their teachers can actually provide that teaching if they are taken through some little training. And the problem has always been access and affordability. And that is where we need to press on government to look at affordability. Access has been sorted out. When they talk about balloons over Kenya, it means there will be broadband across the country.
There'll be broadband, but what about devices, Dr. Ndemo? Because some of these students, yes, there'll be internet. There's the Google Loon balloons going across the country. If you don't have a tablet, if you don't have a computer, you cannot access any of this content.
I say that is what my fellow panelist was talking about. The program can be offered on a multi-platform, meaning that you can take your relative or friend's smartphone and get YouTube and get to study. A lot of people have used Khan Academy, which is an online training program, and done very well in exams. So it is not the first time that it's being offered. Some universities across the world are using these platforms to provide education. Take, for example, Arizona State University. The enrollment for online has moved from 300 students about 6 years ago to 35,000 right now as we speak. So it is not something very difficult. I think people must realize that we must begin from somewhere, build on the gaps that we have, to move forward. We have so many people with smartphones lying idle in their homes. We should have people collecting these iPhones and giving them to kids who can't access these. We have relatives with smartphones who can let the kids to learn. If we wanted to learn, we can learn. I think we should stop giving excuses. If we have broadband, we can now begin to deal with the devices. And that is where I would urge the government to lower the duties on devices so that people can afford the smartphones and begin to learn online.
Okay, Jonathan, let me bring you in here. What's your take? You're an education expert. You engage a lot in this particular sector. From what you've seen in terms of the gaps, what is still needed to make online learning a reality, how practical is it and how can it be implemented?
Thank you, Victoria, for having me. And I think it is important that you put me in between my sister Jackie and my elder brother, Dr. Bitange, because Jackie talks about production of content and how then it is rolled into the school for consumption. Dr. Bitange, what I remember him for was the big brother in ICT during the former President Kibaki's government, so his policy. Now, how we are able to manage policy and practice, that is what is going to make the difference for this country. What Jackie has in terms of what she is able to roll out to any school across the country every day is dependent on a policy decision that she is only an advisor on, but not a resourcer. So Jackie today is forced to go back to her archives to pull out content that was developed previously because we have a crisis. Dr. Bitange Nemo did his bit in helping us get the broadband and the internet spectrum that this country takes is for. But where we have missed the point is in our ability to plan and think through stuff. When the President was announcing that schools are going to be closed, he said the Ministry of Education was going to give instructions on how the closure was going to happen. As an expert in the sector, I got dismayed when the only guidelines that were given were on how the children were going to go home and not on how the teachers needed to manage the children during the travel and the crisis.
Okay.
In the pandemic, nobody has trained the teachers to deliver the curriculum in the situation they find themselves in.
All right.
So they are made to do with what they have.
Let me have Jacqueline respond to that in terms of, there didn't seem to be a game plan. And in the defense of KICD and probably the Ministry of Education, no one saw the impact that this pandemic would have on various sectors, education included. But had there been some sort of a plan of implementing at least online learning? We know there's the digital literacy program. How does that work? And was KICD, the Ministry of Education, wanting to scale that in some form before this emergency actually came and sat in your lap?
Thank you, Victoria. Indeed, I think the crisis that we have now, none of us expected it. But I think we were not waiting for this crisis to be able to start streaming learning through e-learning. If you look back at what we have been doing, we already have had digital content from the time that we started giving education. Actually, in 2003, as we started evaluation of materials, we already had digital content. It's only that the format in which it is not what we have today. So as far back as 2003, we had digital content on CDs, and children could actually access this by using it. But over time, we have moved to the new dispensation where a lot of information now is online. As we speak, we know that we have the laptop project that was initiated in 2017. And we had content that was already in those tablets for the learners for standards 1 and 2 then, which they were using. At the moment, while we know that the CBC has now been implemented, the content that we now have is actually on our education cloud. We do have content for the grade 3 as well. And at the moment, we are preparing to create the content for grade 4. For grade 5 to 8, standard 5 to 8, which is the 844 curriculum, we actually have digital content for all the subjects that they have. And we have digital content for Form 1s to 4 in 12 subjects. So this has been going on away from this crisis that we are having. But allow me then to say, as the crisis came in, we have literally redone lessons, developing new lessons so that we are able to provide to the learners what they need now, based on what the curriculum requirement is. So I don't agree with Jonathan that because of the crisis, we have gone to fish out what was done 3 years ago. If we are giving content that is 3 years ago, then it is irrelevant content in the context of CBC. So if you look at the programs that we are giving, our TV programs are live. A teacher is actually taking the learners through what the current syllabus requires. So that is work that we are doing right now. We are doing it as the demand requires. And we are already preparing for the second term because we don't know when this crisis is going to end. So we already have our teams in place. They are already developing the programs for the second time if we do have to go into a lengthy period and the children are not back in class. So I think as the Ministry of Education and the KICD being privileged to ensure that learners have the relevant materials that support the curriculum is concerned, I think we have done a good job and we have received a lot of support, and that is why we are able to stream our information. Even on TV, we are on DSTV other than the KBC program, and we are also doing the same on Zoom.
And one issue which keeps coming up, and I'm seeing here on the tweets as the conversation continues, is the infrastructure gap. Jacqueline and Erico here says, let's be serious, most rural homes can't afford electricity, but you want them to afford online education. The government assumes everyone can afford basic needs as well as online education. So some people feeling that it is a luxury for majority of learners in this country when the basics have not been dealt with. What do you say to that?
I think from an educational point of view, I would want to say that I wouldn't want to put a blanket statement of that nature because different scenarios play in different places. Now, while I do agree that in the rural area we may not all have electricity, I think that we also need to consider that people have solar power, and it is not just about the power that we get from, Kenya Power and Lighting or KenGen that we are relying on. Secondly, I would want us to also open up our minds to the fact that we are not asking everybody to own a tablet or a computer. When we are talking about the devices, there are several devices we can access, including the radios, the telephones, the mobile phones that we have, and quite a number of us, even in the rural areas, have got smartphones. So I think it's about probably the uptake and usage of digital devices that we need to improve on so that we can be able to support our children in terms of the access they need to have. But I will agree that we are not at 100%. Where we can say that all over the country, everybody may have that access. But in terms of devices, I think we have the various devices that we can utilize because we cannot all have the same thing everywhere.
Okay, and speaking of devices, I'll do a follow-up on that because of the laptop project that was not. There's a question here from Wambo on Twitter saying, I'm listening to this conversation about online learning and thinking what happened to the iPad project that was once the laptop project that was supposed to be initiated by the government. Now, most students could have been learning in rural areas as well. So it seems whenever a lot of these grand projects are announced and it doesn't come to fruition, the ones who suffer are the students, as we're seeing now. Whatever happened to the Laptop Now tablet project?
I think the laptop project is on. The schools were given the devices. If you go to schools, you'll find nice-looking green tablets that are in schools. In quite a number of situations where the schools have access to electricity, they are actually able to use them. And if I may add that we have heard about the Kenya Education Cloud. This is another opportunity to access information away from the laptops and the phones that we are talking about, and our radio programs as well. Now, the laptop project, we were able to load content for the standard 1 and 2 at the time. And they have got an app which is linked to the Kenya Education Cloud. So at the moment, with the fact that if the devices are in the schools, then what the teachers need to do is actually just to upgrade that app, and they'll be able to access all the materials that are on the Kenya Education Cloud. Now, to access our Kenya Education Cloud, you'll go to the URL kec.ac.ke, and you'll find a number of materials that are available from the Kenyan publishers that are being used in our schools, but you'll also find opportunity for open source materials, because we think that it is important to open up opportunities for use of other materials, as long as those materials have been curated and approved by our system.
All right, Professor Ndemo, let me come back to you, because you had mentioned this approach already been taken up at the University of Nairobi, and I know it's happening in various universities across Kenya when it comes to online learning, but it's not all a positive story. Of course, there are a lot of challenges when it comes to trying to implement a program like this. What do you foresee as issues in trying to implement a program like online learning in our schools? You talked about accessibility and affordability of devices and even of services that many Kenyans still cannot. But what other issues do you see becoming a problem if wanting to implement online learning?
Thank you once again, Victoria. I think it is fallacious to begin to say that we should have planned to get into this. You have been thrown into a deep end. You can't start asking someone who is beginning to fight out of the deep end that you are not swimming smoothly. So the small hiccups we have seen at the university is that some lecturers need to go through some training, and the university did give the training. And immediately the universities started negotiating with telecommunication companies to provide discounts on broadband, and that has been done. It is working so well. There are some hiccups in the sense that most people were not used to this, and for me, I would say it has been very positive, especially with graduate students, because they are fewer, they are mature, and they have found that this is the best thing that has ever happened, in the sense that they are able to get to home early, then they are able to take their time, look at the kids before they start the learning. They eliminate such security risks in car when they come at night for classes. And looking forward, it is going to be more affordable to have such programs. A university like University of Nairobi, which has multiple branches outside Nairobi, out of this, we are going probably to get into a new normal where you teach from Nairobi the courses that are in Mombasa, which cuts the cost, at the cost for the students. There are benefits we are seeing going forward. Of course, there are challenges for undergraduates because the classes are larger, that you cannot handle like 200 students on an online course. But going forward, probably we would chop such classes into multiple classes so that we can be able to handle. I think by the end of this, we would begin to see a window of creating higher education to be more inclusive, because it is working, it works very well. There are so many platforms that we can be using. It helps in terms of work-life balance. These are things we never could have discussed before. That we can now learn from those schools that have been offering such programs. 6 million Americans go to school through online. Why can't we start here so that it becomes more affordable, where more people are poorer than in those parts of the world? It is very positive. I don't think we should focus on the negatives at the moment. We have been thrown in the deep end, and we must make it smooth. And in a few months, we begin to see a new normal in higher education.
All right. I have a caller on the line right now. It is the chairman of the Kenya Publishers Association, Lawrence Njagi. Thank you for calling in. Your question or comment, sir?
Thank you very much. First of all, is to congratulate you for airing this very important topic. As Kenya Publishers Association, we are very, very, very pleased with the support that the government is giving the children. If you look at in Africa, for example, we may not be very, very prepared in terms of digital or e-learning. But going by the standards of the rest of the world and what is happening, I think we are quite well prepared in terms of delivering the content. You can hear me?
Yes, yes, go ahead.
Yeah, as we speak, Jackie has talked about the collaboration we've had, and that books are available digitally in all the learning areas, especially for CBC. This is crucial because the books are free of charge, and this is our support during these very difficult times. And we are saying it is not that we are 100% there, but the children can at least reference from by accessing the Kenya Education Cloud, and this is really a stopgap, I would say. And so long as we can continue, or the children can continue accessing, and the teachers are giving them guidelines on how to interpret the various syllabus, strands or topics, then the children will be kept busy. They will be kept at least abreast of what they are learning in the class, especially through the TV programs.
All right. Thank you so much, Mr. Njagi. Let me get back to Professor Ndemo, because there are two concerns here. Once we go to the online platform or digital space, it changes how teaching happens and how learning happens for obvious reasons. And let me combine two questions here. One from Dr. Otieno Menya saying, content delivery does not equate to learning. There's still a gap in understanding digital pedagogy, or the way you teach, taking care of aspects such as interaction, slow learners, gender, etc. Teachers are teaching as if they are usually in class. And let me combine that with a question from Peter saying, children are used to direct learning with a teacher, not devices or listening program. When do kids ask questions to a recorded version? So how do you respond to that in terms of changing how people teach and how students learn?
Actually, the systems that we've had before were very discriminative of slow learners. It's only now technology is coming in to help, especially artificial intelligence, to take care of the slow learners. That is what the government is trying to do with the competence-based education that is being introduced. Any lecturer who is teaching and begins to see that the students are not interacting, you actually change the pedagogical methods that you are using. And initially, it was very difficult to get students to interact. But after a few weeks, they found that it's actually better for them to begin to interact. So it is an interactive process when you teach online using platforms like Skype. Now we are dealing. There is nothing different I can do to get you to understand a concept being in front of you or speaking to you the way I'm speaking at the moment. And the people understand very well. It's just that people are opposed to these systems because they didn't understand very well. But we are beginning to understand it. It doesn't stop you from querying, asking questions. What did you mean with that? In fact, classes like at PhD level, some students who are shy would actually write back or send a message and say, I didn't hear this, can I stay later and you explain? Which is something we cannot do under normal circumstances in classes. So you say, okay, remain behind about 5 minutes, I would explain it. So it's a much better system than actually a physical face-to-face traditional methods that we have been used to.
Okay, let me bring in Jonathan at this point, just to respond to a concern here, and I'll probably ask this question 7 different ways. Peter is saying on Twitter, how can someone speak of smartphones and solar in places like the Masai Mara and Laikipia and West Pokot? They have not considered the end user when developing programs. What do you make of this, Jonathan? Do you feel that the students have not been considered, especially in those rural areas, when it comes to the infrastructure question? Again, they don't feel satisfied with what KICD and the Ministry of Education have done so far, when a majority of students have been left out of this particular exercise when moving learning online.
Victoria, that is a question that speaks to my heart. I have been working in the education space for the last 17 years in the urban slums and urban areas in Kenya. What we are discussing now, we are focusing more on equality rather than equity, and that is where the national debate and national debate has lost it. Because we think about what we need to do for the whole nation and not what we need to do to uplift those who have been behind since independence. I have done my work in Wajir, in Dadaab refugee camp, in the slums of Mombasa, the slums of Kisumu, the slums of Nairobi. We have households that are operating below the poverty line. Not that the government can develop one platform, one solution for everybody, but then what we need to be dealing with is a greater understanding of how do we pull up the people who are at the lowest of the pyramid, who need this education more.
And you raised
in my village in Butere who are unlikely going to access any smartphone in the next 30 days need this education more than the child who's seated in Nairobi somewhere who can borrow a smartphone the way Dr. Bitange Lemo is saying.
All right.
Are the ones who are out of these arrangements, but when the Ministry of Education announces we are going back, the term is being regularized whichever way, they need to be on board and sit in the same class with the other people.
Okay. Jacqueline, as we close, I'll get you to respond to that, the last word, because, and many people are complaining that from where you sit, also in the Ministry of Education, you're only talking about a utopian ideal situation. What Jonathan has spoken to is the reality on the ground that's affecting majority of Kenyans and students. How do you respond to their reality?
Thank you, Victoria. I think I do agree, knowing that we have a multifaceted country with different diverse geographical environments and also diverse social environments. And yes, it is true. We may not reach every single person in their area of need, as the case is. But this is where we as educationists need to put our foot forward. I think what we are trying to do here is to say that we are giving various alternatives and in the best way possible that we can. And looking at these alternatives then, how is it that we can help people in their diverse entities in terms of reach. As a country, we offer a national curriculum with the understanding that it is necessary for us to be able to appreciate what this whole country is about in its diversity. And this is the curriculum that all our children are going through, whether they are in Turkana or whether they are in Butere, as Messiah talks about his home. Now, when we do these programs, and we are saying they are offered on different platforms, we are actually trying to give those alternatives so that if I am not able to reach or to use the laptop, I'm not able to use the smartphone, am I accessible to a radio? If I'm not accessible to the radio, we would actually still go back to our age-old. You remember what we call conventional learning? There are still those books that we can use, but we must make an effort to ensure that our children are keeping in the global trends, because as you realize, digital literacy now is a competence that is required by everybody. We don't want even to be left behind, because we know that accessing information can be done and should be done by the learner, and this is why we are making these efforts. So my take would be that, yes, as we make these efforts, what can we do to ensure that those that are hard to reach are also considered in terms of utilizing what we have and being able to take to them? Now, as KICD, there's an option that we normally make, even of the radio programs, that these radio programs are recorded as well. They can be accessed on a CD. I know right now we may not be able to travel to get to those children who may be far, but that is why we also have the education cloud, because then you can access it later when the lesson that was being undertaken has ended. And the teachers have done a wonderful job. While we think they do not have these digital skills, these are the same teachers who are teaching their children through WhatsApp, because an opportunity has arisen when we have not had the time or the opportunity to do what we are doing now. And so everybody has become creative. So I do agree that we have areas that children may not access this information on the digital platforms. But what alternatives can we be able to send to them? Can we be able to let them know that there is a program on radio, so that this radio that they have at home, they can actually follow the timetable or the KBC timetable or Radio Taifa and still be able to access those lessons, even if they do not miss out on the digital platform, what is being done on the e-platform.
All right. Thank you so much, Jacqueline. Professor Ndemo, I see you want to respond. I'll give you 30 seconds to respond really quickly before we close.
Yes. I just want to add that the government is running a program called Digital Learning Program,
right?
Both for ordinary users and everybody. Kenyans can access a joke through WhatsApp in the deepest part of this country, but we cannot take education through WhatsApp to those kids. I think we need to begin to say that we owe it to our children, that those of us who understand that you can package a program through WhatsApp and kids can learn, we do it. Every village has somebody who understands computers. And if they take at least 1 hour to explain this, we can provide education through digital platforms that the government has given, and others we can put together through the collaborative efforts. That's all I can say.
All right. Thank you so much, Jonathan, Jacqueline, and Professor Ndemo, for your time and your insights as well. Unfortunately, in the interim, there will be quite a few students who will fall through the cracks until we get to a point that we have enough accessibility, reach, and devices that they can actually access this content that will educate them. Hopefully, through this time in the pandemic, we learn these lessons quickly and implement a program that will reach them effectively. Thank you for watching. That does it for Citizen Weekend. I'm Victoria Rubadiri. Keep talking to us online. Hashtag is Citizen Weekend. Up next, One Love. Stay tuned.